Hi, everyone. Hi, Maria. Are you talking? We can't hear you.
Hi, Gina. Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Sure.
all set.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm sure if you had started. Are you going to kick us off and get us started?
Yes. Thank you. So, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the webinar, the UN Innovating Together. Thank you very much for finding the time to join us for the next hour. My name is Maria Blanco, and I work in the Knowledge and Innovation team in the Development Operations and Coordination Office. And I'm here today with Gina Lucarelli, team leader for the Knowledge and Innovations team, who will be delivering most of this webinar. We also have with us Maria Fare. She's a program specialist from the SDG Action campaign. So let's start. Today we will be presenting the first ever report of the UN work on innovations. We will be looking into the latest innovations driven by country teams, their aha moments, and we'll also have a quick look at what we are learning through their experiences. We will then move to the second part of the webinar, where we will be briefly explaining the different windows under the current call for proposals. And we will then give the floor to all of you for a Q&A session. Please use the box on the right-hand side of your computer, well, either right or left-hand side, it depends on the system, to type in your questions and to also tell us your name and your country and whether you are joining from an agency, you work in an agency or in a resident coordinator offices. So we will try to answer as many questions as we can, but if by any chance we run out of time, we will be contacting you by email. So don't worry, we will try our best to answer all your questions. So with this in mind, with presenting the report and then talk a little bit about the fourth round of calls for UN-wide innovation proposals and then a Q&A. I will now give the floor to Gina to present the amazing innovation work that country teams have been doing during the last year. Gina, over to you.
Thanks, Maria. Great. So we'll start this first part of the conversation, which is basically a bit of a summary of what is inside this document. This is a report called the UN Innovating Together. For us here at the Development Operations Coordination Office, we serve as the secretariat to the UN Development Group, which are all the agencies working in development in the 165 countries globally. This was our very first report on innovation, and it was our very first report to look at what it means to innovate together as the UN. So just a word about our niche as the Development Operations Coordination Office within innovation. It is threefold. First, to apply innovation directly to the function of coordination of the UN system. Secondly, to help scale the innovations that are tested within each of the UN agencies. We're seeing more and more agencies having their own innovation teams, strategies, frameworks, approaches. So we hope that we can help scale those to the full development system and maybe even beyond. And thirdly, we want to do what we can to identify what are the bottlenecks to innovation, what gets in your way when you're trying to open up, modernize, be more responsive as a UN system, and how can we help in terms of global frameworks, guidance, policies, etc., to facilitate that work at country level. So that's our focus here at DOCO in terms of innovation. So if you want to go to the next slide. Okay, great. So this is a graphic which gives you a sense of the scale of innovations in use globally across 131 UN country teams. This data is actually from last year. We're just today about to close the deadline on reporting for 2017. So we'll be able to see if this trend continues. But what we see here is slight upticks in the use of different kinds of innovation strategies, methods, technologies, etc. And we see we're at a point where 68 UN country teams, this is out of 131 in 2016, report using some form of innovation in their country programming. So this is sort of where we stand now in terms of moving towards scale. So these are the so far, at least until 2017, so that is 2015 and 2016 were the first years of the DOCO Innovation Facility. We focused on these 4 areas. We focused on data innovations, people's engagements, foresight and alternative futures, and applying human-centered design and technology in business operations. Today, we're going to talk about the first 3. And if you're interested in human-centered design in business operations, do have a look at the report Innovating Together at the UN. There's a small chapter there on this subject, and you can also check the UNDG blog available at undg.org or silofighters.org, because we have several blogs there on how colleagues are using technologies and new methods to drive efficiencies in business operations. So do have a look at that. But today we're going to focus on the first three. And when we talk about data innovations, people's engagement, and foresight, we're very much talking about trying to drive forward something called collective intelligence, right? So collective intelligence is a new term to describe something which is much older, but which has changed dramatically given the advancement of digital technologies. So basically we're talking about here is just a group, a community, city, country, set of organizations, etc., that are thinking and acting intelligently and in a way that is more than the sum of their parts, right? So this is kind of a theory and really a hope that diffuse technology, smarter machines, and hidden human talents, a renewed focus on participatory governance, all of this together can create opportunity to solve public problems. So in terms of very, very pragmatically, in action, what collective intelligence looks like is these 4 things. So we'll move around the circle clockwise, right? So up at the top, looking at what we're trying to get here is a better understanding of facts, data, and experiences, right? So rather than relying on traditional methods of surveys, we're looking at many new sources of information and data, right? Whether it's generated proactively by citizens who send feedback on air quality or poverty or potholes in their neighborhood, or it's derived from businesses. The most telling example, of course, is mobile operators, right? Who, as a byproduct of their work, we can gain a lot of understanding of people's mobility and economic activity. Or it's actually directly and deliberately gained from sensors placed either in cities or in the fields in crops to measure temperature, moisture, etc. So we have this generally more source of what is happening, and collective intelligence is trying to tap into getting a better understanding of what is happening. Moving now around to about 3 o'clock here, beyond just understanding what's happening, we want a better development of options and ideas on how to solve the problems that are out there, right? So here you see examples like governments or public organizations or even companies issuing challenge prizes, right? Where they specify a very specific technical challenge like resistance to antibiotics or something like that. They make a call to everyone out there. They set a prize to solve that issue. You can also see approaches where instead of setting the challenge and finding the solution, you look through ethnography at who's already solving the solution. So this is what's called in the private sector, the lead user method, right? Where you see people actually using business products, but fixing them and kind of hacking them so that they work for themselves. But all of this is in the context of collective intelligence in public service is meant to generate better ideas and options for solving problems. Then we look down here at 6 o'clock, better, more inclusive decision making, right? This is more rare. This is much more rare than tapping into citizens to understand what's happening or vaguely making a call to ask them what they would like to do, right? Actually getting people involved in decisions, especially when it involves budgets, is rare. There's a good example out of Paris where the mayor Anne Hidalgo set up something called Madam Mayor, I Have an Idea. And between 2014 and 2020, they are setting aside 500 million euros, which will be programmed based on people's ideas and priorities, completely based on that. So it's not, it's completely in their hands as to what happens with that money. It's decisions made by the collective. And then finally, when we look at better oversight of what is done, right, we're working in electoral democracy, so every once in a while we need to check up on governments to make sure they're doing what we say. Here we're looking at citizen oversight, right, following the money, use of budgets, campaign promises, are they fulfilled, et cetera, et cetera. So when we think about this in terms of our own UN programming, maybe Maria, if you just want to hit, yeah, there you go, a few times. So basically, these are the elements of our own UN programming. This is the world we operate in, right? Our understanding of the facts is done through the common country analysis, right? Which is where we look at data and understand the situation. So we want to open that up and crowdsource this common country analysis. When we talk about results and budgets, this is determining what the UN does. So we want more ideas from people and technology, and seeing, kind of opening up what it is we do. And then the decision making comes into where we prioritize our finances and our human resources. And then finally, our oversight, our version of oversight and scrutiny, is through the UNDAP annual review, which is a public meeting with government and partners, our monitoring and evaluation activities. So that's sort of collective intelligence in our own little world. So we'll go now to talk a little bit more about each of the areas of innovations that we've worked with over the past couple of years. So what we'll do is we'll talk about what we've been doing and what we've been learning in each case. When it comes to data innovations, there's sort of three main trends going on. One is the exploration of new data sources. You can go to the next slide. It's fine, Maria. Yeah, one is the exploration of new data sources, right? So again, financial transaction data. In Uganda, they've even looked at radio call-in shows and digitized those to understand what issues people are calling in about and how that affects sustainable development issues. So new data sources, we're looking at increased frequency of data collection, so kind of moving towards real-time monitoring, but not quite there, but definitely more frequent monitoring, and definitely inching towards a forward-looking approach where we're not always looking backwards in an evaluation function. And finally, then opening up data sources, right, and moving towards transparency. So all of these examples that are listed here, Uganda, Benin, Sudan, Mauritania, Albania, are all documented on the Silo Fighters blog. So you can always check more if you want more than the headline level. But basically, again, Uganda is using machine learning to digitize radio conversations. They've now, in the last year, expanded this to understand perceptions about refugees in Uganda, a really critical topic there. Benin and Sudan are among the many countries, and of course, there's much work here in terms of within the agencies, in terms of using SMS polling to tap into public knowledge. Are the boreholes working? Are there supplies at the health centers, et cetera, just so we have a sort of real-time understanding of what people are experiencing. Mauritania as well, they're looking at getting data quicker from health centers to the capital to make better resource decisions, to reduce deaths related to childbirth. And Albania is blending data, perception data of women and children on violence in the city and at home, together with police data and tax records, blending all of this and opening it up to others to see what kind of insights they can garner from it. So those are the three trends we've been seeing in data innovations. When it comes to what we're learning, the first lesson really is that the old model of, a surveyor undertaking a survey, going out to a rural area, asking questions, looking around and taking down notes, taking that data back to the capital or to another country to analyze it, is really breaking down a bit, right? So we're seeing much more a focus on data collaboratives rather than extracting data and analyze it among the people who have the education and expertise to do so, right? We'd also like to see much more of engaging people in their own data analysis and interpretation and really leaving something with them rather than extracting this data. So this is done in a couple different ways. So you have Fundación Paraguaya, which does a really interesting piece of work called the Poverty Stoplight, where they do household interviews and assessments of people's relative poverty, but they don't just take this information away. They leave each household with a poverty eradication plan, right? These are the services available for you. These are the things you might want to work on. This is how you can get out of this situation. Or you have a group in Canada that's called In With Forward. They're a community development organization, and they're working on issues of the homeless and semi-homeless. They actually give back the profiles they develop of the people that they interview, right? So instead of just presenting, this is so-and-so, this is what she faces every day, this is how she's coping, they actually give that back to people so that they leave women and men with an understanding of how people see them, something to reflect on. So this, again, is this trend towards collaboration and away from extraction when it comes to data. Secondly, we really need to get out of our default towards building data platforms as a panacea to every data problem, right? We don't have enough data, build a platform. We don't have good data, build a platform. We're not using the data, build a platform. Platforms are extremely useful. However, they're not the full picture, and we really all need to think a bit more about data literacy. I know some work has been undertaken within the UNDG in Asia on this subject, and also how people actually decide things. So we need to get away from this assumption that more data equals better decisions. The connection between those two is not automatic, and it's not that straightforward. So what we advise UN country teams to do when they're thinking about a data innovation project, they're imagining this new source of data and thinking and describing why they deserve funding to go out and get it. We ask them to kind of run through a scenario of, imagine you already have this data. Now, who do you pick up the phone and call, right? What are you telling them to do? Those are the two very, very straightforward questions that you need to know the answer for if you're planning a data innovation project. And when it comes down to it, most of data decisions are for either using your resources better or promoting accountability publicly in how resources are used. And finally, just to say one way, it is not the whole story, but one way we found that helps get either senior level policy makers or people working in their everyday lives to actually use data to make decisions is data visualization. It's a very effective tool to at least bridge that gap a little bit. Let me hand over to you, Maria, to talk a little bit. Oh, not yet. Sorry, forgot about this. I forgot about the ethics. How telling. No, I did want to mention this this piece. What we've been doing for the past few years is kind of providing a little bit of seed funding to UN country teams to incentivize joint innovation work. And we've been very much learning from this at headquarters. One example of which is in dealing with data more and more, personal data in particular, and new forms of data, we need to be mindful of the sort of principles involved here when it comes to privacy. So anonymizing data, protection, that's in the context of sort of like things getting hacked, and in the broader sense, ethics, right? The ethical considerations, which span much more beyond data privacy and data protection, but really look at, the ethics. We're seeing now a lot of the questions around algorithms and whether they are biased or not. So this is a piece of work that we've done really based on what we've seen in the field emerging. And I encourage you to have a look at it. And I definitely encourage you, if you're doing some data work, to have a look at it, give us feedback on it, and let us know what your tactics are for data privacy and protection. And with that, now I'm going to hand over to you, Maria, to talk to us about people's engagement.
Thank you very much, Gina. So the idea behind the people's engagement window, which has been renamed under the current call for proposals, collective intelligence, is to ask country teams to demonstrate the viability and value of new ways of engaging vulnerable groups, the general public, private sector, civil society, specifically in defining priorities, either also informing program design, overseeing public services, and even applying their skills to find creative solutions to specific development issues. So it's basically, it's not just about involving people in your planning process or taking surveys or asking them to take surveys through social media. It's more about how the data you gather impacts policies or decision-making processes related to governance, right? And it can be in the UN governance frameworks, as Gina was mentioning before, or in national policies, right? In government policies in the countries you work. So here's some examples of the work that countries have engaged during the last year. And in general, UN teams are using crowdsourcing for perception data, usually in the situation analysis, during the strategic planning, or even on monitoring, right? And here, some just 4 examples of many, no? And as Ina mentioned before, you're welcome to go to our blog, to the Xylophytes blog, and get to know more about UN country teams work, because it's just it's a field that has many other examples, right? But just to name a few, in Nepal, they have involved their beneficiaries in monitoring their humanitarian assistance program. One example. Also in Madagascar, they have involved young people in monitoring and evaluating the youth programs of several agencies using new technologies in a specific part of the country. And we published this blog 2 weeks ago, so you're welcome to look at it and learn more about this beautiful initiative. And then also in Moldova, the country team asked citizens what poverty means for them, and made this information useful for decision making. And how did they do that? They basically create a tool that basically local governments are able to use to inform their planning and budget allocation. And basically this tool shows needs and sometimes knowledge of the community they serve, right? And then last but not least, and Lesotho, and Gina has mentioned this this way of also engaging the people. And basically in Lesotho, the country team organized a challenge prize to promote more responsive health services. And so these are some examples, very short, very briefly, some examples of how country teams are already using this this window, no? So we have proven basically that using collective intelligence to engage people viewing in our process is possible, and it's very constructive. And here are some of the things that we are learning. We have learned so far. First of all, make sure to give, not just to take. And with this, we mean that closing the feedback loop is key on any area of work, but especially on this one. And with this, we mean that we need to get back to the people to share how we have used the feedback that they have provided us, or how we have used the information they have provided us. And that closing that feedback loop is something that kind of is still a pending task in some of the innovations we are seeing, right? Then second, have a plan for how you will use what you hear. Again, it's not just about going out there and asking people how do you see the work of the UN, or how do you see the work of the government, for example. It's really about how you are going to use that information that you are gathering to your own program process or for national policies. And basically, the overall goal is to show the impact of people's engagement on policy making or in program design in the case of the UN. No? And then last, crowdsource beyond opinions. No? People can contribute with more than perceptions. They can help make decisions on programming and budgets, and they can also help in solutions to problems, and even also crowdfunding for specific initiatives. So these are some of the kind of lessons learned we have that we would love for you to take into consideration, right? When you are like either innovating or submitting a proposal in the current call for innovations. So with this, I think the next over to you, Gina, for the foresight and alternative futures.
Sure, thank you. So this is the last area that we're going to talk through what we've been doing and what we've been learning before we open it up for some Q&A and move to any questions you have about the current call for proposals, which is out there right now. So maybe you can go to the next slide so we can talk about foresight and alternative futures. This always I find is useful as a way to get our heads around why we need to use new methods like foresight and alternative futures. So what we're looking at here is, this is actually the customs declaration signed by Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins after they landed on the moon. And they came back and they landed in Hawaii on July 24th, 1969, and they needed to fill in what cargo they were bringing, moon rock and moon dust samples. And this was, they had to fill in a customs form. And the reason I show this is because when we're thinking about the future, and sustainable development is inherently thinking about the future because it's development that doesn't undermine the ability of future generations to meet their own needs, right? It's sometimes hard for us to put them in a frame. We kind of put them in the frame of the things we're currently using or the things we've always used in the past, right? So here you have these astronauts coming back from the moon, and what do you do with them? Well, they went somewhere, so they need to fill in a customs declaration, right? We see this kind of thing actually sometimes happening when it comes to country teams trying to take on the Sustainable Development Goals and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, right? So often it's supposed to be transformative and integrated and futuristic and everything else, but what we sometimes do is put them into our frameworks that we're used to using, right? How did we tackle the MDGs? Okay, sector by sector, indicator by indicator, etc. And I just show this to show the value of foresight, which is an emergent method meant to help planning more long-term on the horizon and helping to overcome kind of short-termism, which tends to dominate policy, often in electoral cycles. In business, it's quarterly profits, quarter by quarter, that's all that matters. So foresight and futures are methods to kind of overcome that and plan in a way that is with a longer horizon. You can go to the next slide, please, Maria. So in terms of what UN country teams are doing here, right? So we're still operating with UN development assistance frameworks, which are most of the time 5 years long. But they're doing these kind of visioning exercises, which are either 15, 20, or even 50 years down the line, right? We have work in Bosnia and Herzegovina, in Laos, PDR, and in Montenegro, where the UN country teams used tools in Bosnia and Herzegovina and Montenegro. It was an adaptation of a game, a serious game, or a enhanced survey tool, as they call it, because people don't like to admit they're playing games, which actually, you can see it here in the picture on the right, actually gives information about people's priorities on the Sustainable Development Goals and their linkages among them, right? And they're really trying to kind of think futuristically so you can backcast and take action that leads to a positive, plausible future, right? So not just the fairy tale of a UN General Assembly resolution, and neither at the other extreme, you know, a science fiction movie of this horrible future, but somewhere in the middle, what is a real scenario for urban development in Kigali, and how do we make that happen? So that's kind of the practice of foresight and futures as we know it. And then we can go to the next slide. So in terms of what we're learning, we'll just focus on these three things. First, this kind of a method is very useful in overcoming situations where participatory planning is difficult, right? Where you have a very hierarchical arrangement or inequities in the power of people's voices and knowledge. What's great about foresight is, you know, none of us know the future, so we're all equals. So it's an incredible equalizer in terms of a way to gain people's engagement and focus them on the future, right? Which then brings in a variety of voices and data and different sources all on equal footing, because who knows, right? It's the future. The challenge we've been having here is to integrate this foresight and futures methods, which often employ art or virtual reality or anything that kind of gets us into thinking like the future's already here. It's very hard to integrate that back into like results-based management. So we've been having a little bit of trouble figuring out how to do that, and we would very much welcome country teams to kind of help us show how these two worlds meet, right? Because in results-based management, it's all about defining what will happen with the money that I have, right? And any uncertainty around that is kind of dealt with, you know, just brushed aside. That's going to happen. And if it doesn't happen, I'll just explain why it didn't happen, right? But you're not looking at different scenarios. You're not genuinely thinking through kind of futures and backcasting. But what we have found on the upside of this is that the most immediate benefit is really to use foresight to raise awareness of the Sustainable Development Goals and all their targets, right? 169 of them, and to gauge an understanding of people's priorities and the linkages among all of the goals. And this is really the work in Bosnia and Herzegovina. You can read the blog on that to see more about that. That's what they've done. So with that, Maria, let me then just show this summary slide. I won't run through all the text here, but this was just our attempt to summarize what we just talked about, right? These are the kind of trends that we've seen over the past couple of years. It by no means limits us for the future in terms of what can be done and what should be done. But in terms of data, people's engagement, and futures, these are the kinds of things that we're seeing happen and hoping to see more of. And that's what we've documented in the report, the UN Innovating Together. So we'll send around these slides so you don't have to memorize everything that's here or take it apart yet. But let me then hand over to Maria. Do you want to take questions now, or do you want to go into the next segment and then take questions?
Let me see. Right now, we have two questions, if you want. Okay, we have a question from Agnes. Maybe you want to take it now, Gina? It's on data.
Sure. Do we know where? No, we don't know where Agnes is writing from. Agnes, no, can you maybe?
She didn't mention it.
What country or agency you're working in?
No. She hasn't put it. Agnes, if you can quickly type, which country are you calling from, and which agency, or whether you are from an RCO, do you work in an RCO? But meanwhile, Gina, if you want, UNFPA Rwanda. Thank you, Agnes. So Agnes' question is, to what extent these program data are trusted and used by different governments? And if you can kindly share an experience. Can this program data be used beyond programming and used for evidence-based policy making?
Mm-hmm. So thanks, Agnes. And I know that, as I understand it, there have been there's been some work with FORESIGHT in Rwanda. In this case, specifically around the Sustainable Development Goals. We didn't talk about it here, but I understand that's the case, and we're following that that storyline closely. So I think you raise an important point, which is that anytime you're creating a new source of data, whether it's from mobile phones, financial transactions, or people's ideas and experiences in their own lives or thoughts about the future, there is often the first thing you need to do is prove it's possible, right? It's possible to get this data. It's constructive, as Maria said. The second thing you need to do is get people to believe in it, right? So in some cases we do experience, but I would say this is decreasing. We have experienced some, just probing of the data from traditional statisticians, right, who have methods for minimizing error and bias and things like that. And so when they're looking at data which is coming in and kind of undoing a lot of the assumptions of traditional statistics, there can be a bit of a resistance there, or at least it's just a newness and they're just digging into it and ensuring that they can stand behind it. So that's definitely part of the story, but one that I would say is decreasing. We now have, for example, in the UN Statistical Commission, which is the member state body for national statistical offices, we have a working group on big data, for example. So the idea has always been that these new sources of data, citizen-generated data, open data, big data, et cetera, they supplement traditional statistics. They don't replace them. And there is a way to move forward with both of them and a reason for both of them.
Thanks, Gina. We have also a question from Gilles from UNFPA South Africa. And let me read it. It's very clear. You mentioned at the start of your talk that one of the objectives was to identify bottlenecks to innovation. In your experience, what are the main challenges faced by UN country teams when exploring joint innovative work?
So I think here it's, there's the usual things we complain about whenever we do any programming work, right? There's the sort of tension between the colleagues who are running the programs, who are trying to get stuff done and under a certain time period and in a complex environment, meeting the needs of many stakeholders. And then there's the need to sort of adhere to policy procedure when it comes to procurement, recruitment, partnership arrangements, et cetera, et cetera. So most of the bottlenecks we see, at least on our side of the story, on the UN side of the story, come in terms of meeting the demands of our policies, which are important to ensure fairness and transparency, et cetera, and adapting that in a situation where we're going to be needing to partner more with the private sector, sometimes in cases where no money is exchanged. And we need these formats and frameworks that allow us to do so. One of the things we find with the private sector is that they prefer to partner with us as one UN rather than agency by agency, right? They will do it agency by agency, but they would prefer if there was coordination, because on their side, it would be a lot easier for them if they said, okay, we now have a legal agreement with the United Nations, period, right? As Vodafone or what have you. So that's one thing that we've seen, is that actually the external environment is kind of calling for more coherence, and that our own partnership procedures need a bit of a update in order to make it easier for us to do this all the time. We also see the other kind of bottleneck, and this is why I mentioned the guidance on data privacy protection and ethics for the use of big data in advancing Agenda 2030. There, we saw one of the bottlenecks was to even get access to some of these new forms of data, right? Some companies will give it to you if you just sign a non-disclosure agreement, but others want to know that you have minimum standards that you're protecting this data, right? And in particular, when it comes to private sector, mobile phone operators, in this case, they don't want any of their business secrets revealed, right? So if we show them we have minimum standards, then they trust us more that we know what we're doing with this kind of data, right? Because the tricky part about these new forms of data is that even though it may be anonymized in one form, once it's combined with another data, which doesn't even exist yet, you can re-identify the person. So there's a lot of security and privacy concerns around it. And very often, there isn't an existing regulatory or legal framework governing the use of this data in the places we operate in. And therefore, it's on us as the UN to show that we have these minimum standards.
Thank you, Gina. So those were the 2 questions. Oh, wait, one more. 2 questions. Okay. From ILO, and 2 questions. Okay. So, Lalaina. Okay, it's about the call for proposals document. Instead of like on the report. So I will leave that for the second Q&A. Gina, if that is okay with you?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I see one more question here from FAO in China.
Yes.
Oh, now they're all coming in.
Yes, you want to answer?
There's many of them. Okay, so maybe we'll just answer the one question from FAO in China, and then we'll move to the call for proposals, because it seems like we're getting quite a few questions on those.
Okay, very good. Do you want to answer FAO China, because you
yes,
know
it's a
that project?
yes, sure. I'm just looking. So the question is, could you tell us more about the Moldova case of using crowdsourcing to assess what poverty means beyond income? So here, I would just refer you to the UNDG blog, which is at silofighters.org or undg.org, and then go to the blog. And if you can do a search for Moldova, you'll get their blog there. Essentially, the work they did is what Maria described, which is trying to assess poverty beyond income, but doing so in a way that is consultative and participatory and based on people's experiences. They also did it in a way that would actually be meaningful to policymakers, which is a tough balance to achieve. But I would suggest you have a look at that blog. It's short, it's like 500 words or something. And if you feel so inspired, leave a comment on the blog, and then you can be in touch with the author directly, who knows most about this. So should we move to the call for proposals, Maria?
Yes, let's do that. We have, because I see a few more questions, but they are also related to the call for proposals. So yeah, let's quickly go through the 2 slides that we have, and then open the floor again to colleagues. What do you think, Gina?
Yes, sounds good. Also, because we're running a little bit towards the end of our time.
Yes, perfect. Okay, so for all of you, a couple of weeks ago, we launched the 4th round of call for innovations proposals, and most of you, I'm sure you have seen it. If not, you can always go to the UNDG.org website, UNDG.org, and it's there on the front page, so you can download and read the terms there. The deadline for receiving calls for country teams to submit their proposals is on the 23rd of February. And we are expecting country teams to submit like ideas in the areas of, as Gina mentioned before, data, collective intelligence, financing, foresight, and behavioral insights. This year, financing and behavioral insight. Well, last year we had financing too. This year, the main new area is behavioral insights. And in general, you can apply to this. You can like submit a proposal within 2 specific windows, right? The first one, the proof of concept window, it's kind of the one for that is directed for those country teams that want to push forward on new frontiers, right? And there are those teams that want to break new grounds and test new hypotheses or use new methods and technologies. And the ceiling for this submission is $50,000, and it's always one per country, right? The second window is what we have titled the scaling window, and there are like two subcategories within the scaling window: the vertical and the horizontal. So the vertical scaling is targeted to those countries that want to document how their past innovations can be used to influence global policies, UN global policies. And then the second subcategory within the scaling window is more about adapting and applying innovations that have been tested in another country or within one specific agency or even in another sector. The ceiling for submissions is also one per country, is $50,000 as well. One example that we wanted to bring to your attention of the horizontal, within the horizontal scaling window, is that of those countries that are engaging people as part, like in understanding what SDGs are, or which specific SDGs, let's put it like that, are a priority for them. And as I mentioned at the very beginning of the webinar, we have today with us a colleague from the SDG Action Campaign, and our colleagues from this initiative can help country teams that are interested in this specific area of scaling with specific surveys to collect these perceptions that and ideas from people related to the SDGs. So Maria Fare from the SDG Action Campaign is with us today, and I will give her the floor now quickly. Maria, let me unmute you. Okay, here. Maria, can you hear me?
Yes. Hello.
Yes. Hi, yes. Maria. Thank you. Yes. So I'm going to give you the floor so you can briefly explain our colleagues online how the SDG Action Campaign can support countries scaling horizontally, as we say, these initiatives of people engagement around the SDGs. Thank you for participating today.
Yes, thank you very much, Maria and Gina, and hello to everybody. So I would like to bring to your attention, maybe some of you are aware of the survey My Word that it was used during the consultations, the 2015 consultation, as a consultation tool to bring the voices of the people as part of the negotiation, so that negotiators could be also informed by the priorities of what the people was expecting or wishing for the future to become. So in this sense, now that we moved to the implementation phase of the SDGs, the My Word has been transformed to the My Word 2030, and the objective is not to consult what the people wish or what the people want, but it's used as a monitoring tool for accountability purposes. So basically, we are still trying to engage people to continue this spirit of transparency, inclusion, and participation that was that give birth to the new agenda into this implementation. So the objective now is, again, there are 3 questions in this survey in the My Word 2030, and the first one is if the people is aware of the SDGs, and this is for us very important because we understand that bringing somehow the pressure and becoming a witness of the process as people, as collective intelligence, can facilitate and can contribute to accelerate and to achieving the SDGs. So the second question, we are still asking the people to somehow prioritize. So, you know, which of the goals are more important for you as an individual and for your family? And you have to pick 6. And the third one is from those 6 questions that you choose, you know, like if you think that the progress is better, is worse, or if it stays the same compared with the previous year. So this My World 2030 is already collecting questions. You can go to the website, but also it has now the difference in comparison with the previous one that you can adapt the My World survey questionnaire to the context of your own country. So we develop a My World library in which you can pick and choose for more than 90 questions that have been tested in different contexts, in different regions. It has the scientific rigors when you ask them, that are easy to communicate, respectful with the people that you're trying to survey. So it's basically questions that you can take to gather more information and more in-depth information from each one of the goals and targets. And in some countries, maybe it's more important to gather more information about governance. In some others, maybe it's more relevant to learn more about climate change. So it really depends on your country that you can adapt the survey to whatever your needs are. And the data, of course, we are trying to use it to monitor and to see how the progress of the SDGs are going, not according to the indicators, but according to the perception of the people. So for us, it's very important the reporting side, using the data that is collected in a participatory way to inform the progress of the SDGs, but it is also because there's data there on prioritization and whatever you choose to ask using the My World library. This data can also be used for planning purposes, not just for reporting, for monitoring, for accountability, but also to inform different planning opportunities that will come along the years, to also try to have a political impact at the national level also. So for example, if there is a planning, national plan that is about to be planned, this can also be informed using this data. If there is also, for example, a coming UNDAF that you had to develop, this can also be used and being informed by using the voices of the people, and be also and have this as another variable to also decide what to include and how to prioritize budgets and human resources. So all of this is available, and we are very, very much interested in trying to create a group of countries in which we can also set a standard for reporting VNRs, in which we can create My World data that is not only randomly developed, which is very good, because every time that you go out on the street and you ask questions, you are communicating and creating awareness. But what we want to also do is a scientific representative sample, also collected in a participatory way, but this can also help us in make the point with much more strength and say, like, this is really what represents the voices of your country. And in this way, if we can have a group of countries that can include a collective voice of their people in their national voluntary reviews, we can set the standards on how participation can continue to be a good practice along the years of implementation of the SDGs. So the SDG Action Campaign is open to work with you in preparing these proposals and maybe helping you in implementing if you think this kind of idea speaks to your needs. And I leave it here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria. Thank you very much for all that information. Maria will be with us for the Q&A session in case you have more questions related to this specific initiative and how you can use it when applying, how you can refer to them when applying to our innovation to the call for proposals. Meanwhile, so I think I'm going to give the floor again back to Gina so she can quickly explain the new areas of innovation in this call for proposals. Gina, over to you.
Sure, thank you. So I know we're running short on time, so we'll zip through this. When you apply here, you choose an area, and whether you're doing proof of concept, like cutting edge, new breaking ground stuff, or scaling, right? And whether you're scaling up to policy or spreading, adapting, and applying in other countries, other sectors, other teams, etc. So in terms of the areas, we're going to continue with data innovations. We're looking for, please help us break the mold on this area. There are more and more sources of data. We really do want to see new, the proof of concept and the proof of use of that data. So please focus there. This doesn't this relates mainly to the new sources of data that we talked about here. We've renamed people's engagement to just call it collective intelligence. So that's what that pink bubble refers to. That's one of the areas that we are looking for proposals in. We're continuing with futures and foresight, and I would really encourage proposals in this area. We've had less in the past. It's something that we'd really like to learn more about and see more in action. And again, here you can be very creative, involving artists. You can do museums of the future. You can do scenarios on what public services will be like in 2050. Please, apply your creativity here as much as you wish. Then just speaking briefly about finance and behavioral insights. So finance, we had as a window last year. Here, what we're talking about in terms of innovative finance is basically moving beyond the usual reliance on international public funding to advance development objectives and delving into domestic and private funding flows. So international private flows, domestic private flows, and domestic public funds, right? Here we're looking at three areas in particular. We're looking at crowdfunding, peer-to-peer finance, and then the creation of new asset classes. So here, the development impact bonds, pay for services type schemes, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what we have in terms of innovative finance. Our colleague Richard Bailey, who leads on this, is not with us today, but you can always drop him some questions if you want to submit a proposal in that area. On behavioral insights, this is the first year we're offering this as an area of innovation, and we know many agencies and governments have done work in this area. Essentially here, what we're talking about are learning from people's behavior and learning from insights we see in nature to design better programs and policies. So here we'd be looking at testing different methods to see which one actually leads to the behavior change you're trying to get to. There have been various methods of how you get people to turn off the lights at home, how you get them to pay their taxes, how do you actually get the behavior to change that you're trying to change, and how do you test different methods to get there. The nudge unit in the UK is famous for this. We're also looking at flipping the usual approach. So instead of making an innovation challenge, go out there and find the lead innovators who are already solving their own problems and learn from them. This is also something that would fall under behavioral insights. And finally, we've never done anything in this area, and I'd love to. This is the field of biomimicry. So this is where you actually learn from nature in terms of improving collaboration. So bees have a really sophisticated way of caucusing where to put their nests. We could probably learn a lot from that when it comes to collaboration. Many other, situations in nature have sustainability elements. There's a lot that can be learned there. So there's some links in the document as to what ideas you might push. I would really encourage proposals in this area because we've never done it before. So we will look more kindly on proposals there because we have less to compare it to. So those are the areas for this year. And we do have some areas which are out of scope for 2018. These are all listed in the call for proposals if you want more information on them or why they're out of scope. Let's open it up for questions because we are at 10 o'clock and I want to make sure that we hit some of the questions that people are asking.
Okay, so I'm going to start with the question that Lalaina typed a few minutes ago. She's writing from ILO, Madagascar, and she has two questions. First question, in the call for proposals document, it is specified that the ceiling for submissions for each innovation window is 50,000. Does it mean that if there are 2 or more UN agencies applying in one country, the total amount remains 50,000? That's the first question.
Yes, it does. So these are really these are not meant to be, first, they do need to be UN country team interagency proposals. No single agency proposals will be considered because we're trying to incentivize joint work as a UN in terms of innovation. And yes, the ceiling remains 50,000 because they're meant to be seed funds to try out new things, not necessarily, you know, to solve every issue and advance the SDGs in the fullest sense of the term.
Thank you, Gina. And then the second question is it the funding reserved for activities only and no other costs?
It should be for costs related to what you're trying to do. Yes.
Yeah. And then a third question from Lalaina with 3 questions from Madagascar. So another question on scaling window or horizontal scaling window. Is it possible to continue an innovation action that we have initiated to ensure the tangible and demonstrable impacts?
I would say yes, but not just more of the same. So if the work fits into one of the areas we've talked about and you are helping us answer some of the questions that we've laid out in terms of what we're learning, then I would say, you know, move in that direction, right? So we don't just want to see more SMS-based surveys for the sake of going nationwide. We'd like to see SMS-based surveys that clearly impact a specific decision to be made by the government or the UN, right? That complete the feedback loop that Maria talked about, that kind of move forward the story and the state of learning of where we are now.
Thank you, Gina. And then we have a question from China and from FAO. So what are the common features of the winning proposals?
So yeah, I think if you have a look at the call for proposals and the actual form that we're asking you to fill in terms of submitting your proposals, you'll have the best idea of what we're looking for. You can also always look at silofighters.org, another advertisement, to see the kinds of work that's been funded in the past. Again, we really do encourage you to kind of break the mold here. This is not a funding mechanism for all of the Sustainable Development Goals. It is not. There's tons of work that needs to be done as a UN system and individually as agencies to move that transformative agenda forward, but this is not meant for that. This is really meant to test new ideas and break into new frontiers.
Thank you, Gina. We have now a question from Honduras, specifically on the data part. Laura from the Resident Coordinator Office. So Laura's question is related to the signs of success. It is compulsory to show the impact of the new data collected in the decision-making of the national counterpart before the end of the year?
Well, certainly, you know, sometimes these things take a little bit of time to land, but what we're looking for is from the beginning of your design that you are taking in consideration who is going to use this data and for what purpose, and how you will know whether having this data made any difference, right? So absolutely, you know, sometimes you may need more than a year to show all of the impact. Things may, you know, there may be kind of a slow cooking change that might take longer than a year. However, we do need to see that you have this in mind from the beginning and that it's not just data collection for the sake of better situation analysis, which is kind of the state of the art of where we've gotten stuck a little bit. So I hope that helps answer your question.
Thank you, Gina. And then we have another one from UNCDF, Brussels. Irene, question. So Irene says, it has to be a joint UN proposal. What is the minimum number of agencies that can submit the proposal?
So in addition to, having, let's say, really minimum 2 or 3 agencies, I mean, 2 is really the bare minimum, but 3 would be better. We understand it's a small amount of money, so obviously, you don't want 15 agencies in there because they won't be necessarily benefiting from it financially. But it should absolutely be vetted through the resident coordinator office, right? And at least on the radar of the UN country team as something that is underway and something that they're planning to learn from and make decisions on in the future as to whether it should be scaled. So that would be the answer there. It needs to go through the RC office. The UN country team needs to be aware and backing it. And the very minimum is 2 agencies, but more like 3.
Thanks, Gina. We have another question from Sarar that I don't know. Okay, let me see. Okay, Sarar is from Pakistan. Pakistan, let me see. Pakistan, but I don't know the agency, Gina, sorry. So the question is, can the proposal be implemented by the RCO on behalf of the UNCT?
So this wouldn't really, I mean, it can be managed, coordinated by the RCO, but it does need to involve broader than just the resident coordinator's office.
Okay, very good. Clear. So then we have another question from UNCDF, this time from Senegal. And I read the question. Our UNCT will submit a proposal with several agencies, such as UNCDF, ILO, UNDP, FIO. I am working on the proposal on behalf of the team, and we will be the one inputting it in the website. And this is a technical issue, Gina. So if you want, I can answer. Unfortunately, I don't see my agency, UNCDF, listed in the list. Can you address it? And I wanted to read out this question because I have several colleagues asking me this by email. I have just updated the form today. So now I have created a new box, so you can type in the name of the agencies that is not listed in the current form. The agencies I placed there are we have, based on the data that we have, the agencies that are listed in the form are the ones that are commonly at country level. We couldn't I couldn't list the 40 of them of the ones that are part of the UNDG. But I just added 2 boxes boxes so you can include the name of your agency if it's not listed there. Thank you very much for that, Sabine. So then I think that's it, Gina. I think that those are most of the questions or all the questions that I can see in our chat box. Maybe, I don't know if maybe we can quickly go to the last slide and give maybe a couple of more minutes for colleagues to type in any other question, just in case.
That's good. Yep,
so,
sounds good.
Yeah, the last slide is about another advertising moment, as Gina mentioned before. So, and it's about our Silo Fighters blog. So you can, in our undg.org website, you can access our Silo Fighters blog there, or type in silofighters.org. So this is our blog, where we are trying to capture the work of country teams around innovations. And the idea is that this blog is sort of a space for colleagues all over the system to work out loud, right? And to basically submit a short kind of like reflection on where they what they are trying to do and how they are managing the process, what they are learning, what are their challenges, etc. So you can, if you go into this website, into our website, you can see already some of the experiences by country teams, and Tina said me before, you can use them to basically understand the kind of things we are sort of looking for, right? Also, whenever you are submitting a proposal, and if your proposal is selected, this submitting a blog is the key reporting mechanism that we ask country teams to fulfill. And basically, with this means that whenever we support with this small fit, with this seed funding, country teams, we ask for country teams to submit a blog of around 600 to 800 words, sharing with us what or their experience has been in implementing the innovation, these innovations. No, the idea is that it's a knowledge sharing tool. We feel like it's a cool one and very formal, and we are happy to help you through the process of writing, advising you on how to write it, etc. So just for you to be aware that that this is here, or this exists, and you can check it right now. But that we will be expecting country teams to submit proposals for the a blog if their proposal has been selected. So that's quickly on the blog, again, silofighters.org. And Gina and Maria, I don't see any other questions from our colleagues. Gina, I don't know if you want to mention anything before we close, or Maria, before you close, if you want to mention anything, please let me know. Thank you.
No, I think that's it. We've run a little bit over time, but pretty well handled. Only 13 minutes. So huge thanks to all of you for joining. And again, just drop us a line if anything, if you're come up with further questions that you weren't able to run through here. Please do have a look at the UN Innovating Together report. We're always trying to improve, and so the best we can do is get feedback from you on how to do that. And thanks to everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you very much, Dina, and yes, thank you very much, everyone. And we are available to answer any other questions that you may have. You can contact me directly. My email address is maria.blanco@undg.org. And thank you very much, and have a great morning, afternoon, evening. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.